Poison hemlock kills more experienced foragers than beginners. The people who die from misidentifying wild plants are almost never the ones just starting out. Beginners are afraid of the woods. They cross-reference, they second-guess, they call someone. The fatalities, when they happen, tend to come from the people who have been foraging for 10 or 15 or 30 years. People who have walked past the dangerous plant 1,000 times and never had a problem. People who have stopped looking at the stem because they already know what they picked. That gap between the plant you know and the plant you have stopped checking is where these deadly pairs live. The first is poison hemlock and Queen Anne's lace. Both belong to the carrot family, the Apiaceae. Both throw out the same lacy white umbrella of flowers in summer along the same roadsides and field edges. The carrot family is full of edible plants: parsnip, carrot, parsley, dill, fennel, and it is also home to what the United States Department of Agriculture calls the most violently toxic plant that grows in North America. Poison hemlock's deadly alkaloid is coneine, the same compound that killed Socrates. The two giveaways most foragers were taught as children are the stem and the hairs. Queen Anne's lace has a hairy, ridged, solid stem and a single dark purple flower in the middle of the umbel, the drop of Queen Anne's blood. Poison hemlock has a smooth, hollow, hairless stem with red or purple blotches that look like bruises. The mnemonic most people learn is that Queen Anne has hairy legs. What catches the experienced forager is the first year. Poison hemlock is a biennial. In its first year, it never flowers, never grows tall, and never shows the obvious purple blotched stem. It sits low to the ground as a feathery green rosette that looks to a confident eye exactly like a young wild carrot. People who have correctly identified the flowering second-year plant 100 times will sometimes glance at the rosette and not bother with the stem check because they already know what they are looking at. The second pair is the more dangerous cousin, water hemlock and wild parsnip. Water hemlock, Cicuta maculata, grows in wet places, along stream banks, in marshes, and in the shallow edges of ponds. The umbrella-shaped white flowers look like every other plant in the carrot family. The root is a cluster of small white tubers that, when sliced, ooze a yellowish, oily liquid, and several accounts written over the centuries describe that root as smelling like wild parsnip and tasting, perversely, sweet. CIQ toxin, the active compound that acts as a GABA receptor antagonist, is concentrated in those tubers. A piece smaller than a walnut has killed adults. Symptoms begin within 15 minutes to a few hours, beginning with violent seizures and ending in fatal cases with respiratory paralysis. The Department of Agriculture's language is plain about it. Water hemlock is the most violently toxic plant on the continent. The detail that catches experienced foragers is that the root often does look and smell correct. The classic teaching is to check the cross-section of the rhizome for the horizontal chambers and the yellow oily fluid, but in some plants the chambers are partial, and in some the fluid is faint, and a forager who is digging quickly along a stream bank does not always cut the root cleanly enough to see what is there. According to the American Association of Poison Control Centers' annual reports, poison centers in the United States report 1 to 2 deaths per year from this family of mistakes. Most of the victims are not new to the plant. They are people who knew it and got casual. The third pair lives in the woods. The deathcap mushroom and the edible white mushrooms it grows beside. Amanita phalloides, the deathcap, is responsible for roughly 90% of all mushroom-related deaths worldwide. Half a cap is enough to kill an adult. The toxins are amatoxins, which destroy the liver through hepatic necrosis, and they are not destroyed by cooking, freezing, drying, or pickling. Symptoms typically do not begin for 6 to 12 hours, by which time the liver damage is already underway. There is a deceptive middle period of recovery where the person feels better just before organ failure sets in. The classic teaching is the volva, the bulbous cup at the base of the stem where the mushroom emerged from its universal veil during development. A death cap pulled cleanly out of the ground will show this cup. A death cap snapped off at ground level will not, and that is how experienced collectors get caught. In the button stage, before the cap has opened, a young death cap looks almost identical to an edible puffball, or to certain edible agaricus species. The greenish tint that gives the mature cap its name is variable. There are white forms. In Northern California, in late 2016, a single warm, wet bloom of Amanita phalloides sent 14 people to the hospital with liver damage in 2 weeks, as documented by the California Poison Control System. Most of them were not novices. The fourth pair is the spring one. Wild garlic, called ramsons in Europe and ramps in North America, has two close visual matches, lily of the valley and autumn crocus. In April and May, across the deciduous forests of Central Europe, ramsons send up two broad green lance-shaped leaves from a small bulb. Lily of the valley produces almost identical leaves in the same woods at the same time. Autumn crocus, despite its name, sends up its leaves in the spring as well, and they are also lance-shaped and green, emerging from a bulb in the same kind of ground. The German Federal Institute for Risk Assessment, which tracks these poisonings, reports that confusions between ramsons and its two doppelgangers cause hospitalizations every spring in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Croatia, and that some of these are fatal. 3 to 4 autumn crocus leaves can be enough to kill an adult. The toxin is colchicine, and like amatoxin, it has a delayed onset. Lily of the valley contains cardiac glycosides called convallaria glycosides. By the time the person feels sick from either plant, it is often too late. The test most foragers were taught is smell. Crush a leaf between your fingers. Ramsons smell strongly of garlic. The other two smell of nothing. The problem is that if a forager picks a large handful of ramsons and a single autumn crocus leaf is mixed in, the garlic smell on their fingers from the other 40 leaves overwhelms the test. The Institute's standing recommendation is to pick the leaves one at a time and check each one. Almost nobody who has been doing this for years actually does that. The fifth is the one that catches American foragers most often: pokeweed and elderberry. Both produce dark purple black berries in late summer. Both grow in disturbed ground at the edges of fields and woods. Both have reddish stems. Every part of the pokeweed plant is toxic, with the highest concentration of phytolactotoxin in the roots and seeds, and 8 pokeweed seeds have been reported as enough to kill a person. Elderberry stems are woody, pokeweed stems are herbaceous, but in the second year, a pokeweed stem can be thicker than a young elderberry trunk. Elderberry berries hang in flat-topped clusters that face downward. Pokeberries grow on a single vertical spike, like a row of beads. This is the easy distinction, and it works 99 times out of 100. The 100th time is when an experienced forager spots a familiar elderberry bush from a distance, walks up, fills a bag, and only at home, sorting the harvest, notices that some of the clusters were arranged on vertical racemes and not flat umbels. Pokeberries have been sold at farmers markets, mislabeled as elderberries, by people who have been picking berries for decades. The pattern across all 5 pairs is the same. The plant the experienced forager misidentifies is not unfamiliar, it is familiar. The check they skip is not a check they did not know about. It is one they have done so many times that they stopped doing it. The mnemonic about hairy legs, the slice through the rhizome, the pull from the vulva up, the leaf-by-leaf garlic test, the look at the cluster shape. Every one of these is taught in the first month of any decent foraging course, as emphasized by experienced educators like Samuel Thayer. The deaths come later, after the course is long over, and the habit has settled into something that no longer requires attention. That is the actual hazard, not the plant, the familiarity.